Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Yield from BFF Games. Yield is a 2 to 5 player, fast-playing, area control game in which across 3 rounds of play, players are going to be trying to use their armies to move around the board and conquer the various fortresses to gain points. This is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. With that, let's go ahead and dive into a bit more detail on how this one plays. Like I said already, you have 3 rounds. In each round, you're going to go through a sequence of playing out 4 cards, then going through a battle sequence where you potentially resolve battles against anyone next to you until you go ahead and continue on to the next round. Well, there's a bit of a restocking your armies phase, buttressing your armies after round 1 and round 2. Now, the general idea is you are trying to take control of fortresses. Fortresses start off at level 1, but then some fortresses, the ones the players start with, are level 2 fortresses. They have their own player token on top of them. You see, every time you conquer a fortress in the game, you're going to add a player token to that fortress when you take it over, but that also increases the points of that fortress. That is now a 2-point fortress for anyone who takes it over, but whenever a fortress changes hand, it gets a player token of that player, meaning they'll slowly be getting stronger and stronger. Along the way, you'll also be upgrading your own fortresses, adding player tokens to them, which you definitely want to do with those that you think you can protect, but you'll also possibly be taking player tokens from fortresses to go ahead and power up your ritual card, which is a stronger card in your deck. That's basically the general idea. Try and take control of fortresses. Fortresses will have various ways that they go up in strength. Whoever has the most total strength in fortresses at the end of 3 rounds in play is going to win the game. Now, what you're actually doing on a turn is you're going to go ahead and look at your hand of cards. You have 6 different cards to play over here. Each card has different items you can do. Either you can go ahead and do both items, or when the banners are split, you can pick one of these 2 things to do. And we'll talk more about them, but the general idea is going to be ambushing, which is an attack mid-round. Usually there's an attack at the end of each round, but ambushing lets you attack mid-round. There's also going to be moving. There's going to be buttressing your fortresses. Ritual, which lets you redo the effects of another card at the cost of 1 level of strength from a fortress. Things like that in the game. Now, players are going to go ahead and pick a card. They'll go ahead and, let's say I'll pick this one over here, and then they'll all go ahead and reveal those cards simultaneously. So you go ahead and reveal, all the players have gone ahead and done whatever card that they're trying to do over here. That's not necessarily the best one to play early on. In fact, they're not actually shuffled right now, I'm realizing. But either way, you're going to go ahead and pick a card to play in the game and resolve the effects of that card, but all players are going simultaneously. So for example, as the purple player here, I can either move two units, 1 each, or 1 unit, 2. That's basically what this card does. It's starting the element of repositioning myself on the board, which is going to be particularly helpful since I'm next to this fortress over here, which I technically don't own yet, that I may want to go ahead and wander out and take control of. So you're going to play a card and you're going to resolve that card. Now, before we go further, it's worth noting that you're going to start the game with 12 strength divided up amongst your 3 armies. But the key thing is that 12 strength is divided amongst your 3 armies, and other players don't know how it's done. So, for example, as the purple player over here, I went fairly boring, and I have a 4 strength army, a 4 strength army, and a 4 strength army. Each of these tokens matches one of the shapes of one of these units, which lets me track what my army strength is. Other players don't know that yet, although they might if they're able to correctly track what's going on after a battle. And then other players might have different configurations. For example, this blue player over here, which I technically shouldn't know, although I set it up so I do. We have 6 strength on this army. We have 2 strength. This one move. We have 2 strength on this army, and we have 4 strength on this army for again a total of 12 strength. So you're trying to be mindful of how you want to divide up your strength and which units have more strength. But until the players see your unit in battle, they don't know whether they're dealing with a 1 strength unit all the way up to a 10 strength, which is the maximum starting strength, because you got to divide it, which means you need to leave 2 for those other armies. So you're dealing with hidden armies. You're dealing with these cards over here that are going to allow you to move around the board. And to that end, let's go ahead and walk through the basic idea of these cards. We have this card over here, which, like I said already, can let 1 unit move 2 or 2 units move 1. We're going to go ahead and actually have this unit go 1-2 to try to go ahead and get control of that fortress over there. We have this unit over here, which this card is going to let you either move 1 or initiate a combat with a +6 value. This lets you initiate combat mid the round sequence, which is very important because it's the only card that lets you do that. Normally, combats are resolved at the end of the round after all 4 cards have been played. This ambush card is going to let you do it earlier and also give you a boost in combat, but you need to make sure you time it right because the card itself does not allow you to move. You need to be mindful of turn order because you need to be next to another player's enemy, another player's unit. So for example, this card right now, if I played it, wouldn't allow me to do anything. I'd have to use the move 1, which is not as beneficial. Versus if I played it when I was over here, or maybe I played it over here, hoping my enemy unit will wander up to me, then I can go ahead and play the ambush against them if there's any units adjacent to any of my units. So the timing of that one is important, and keeping in mind, you might play it when you're next to this unit over here, but if they go first in turn order, they may move away before you can resolve it, so you really need to think through when is the right time to play your single ambush card in the game. Over here, we allow to go ahead and take control of fortresses and move one, and you can do that in any order. So for example, I can go over here and then go ahead and take control of the fortress there. That's going to be what this card does. This one lets you get 3 individual move units. This one over here is going to allow you to upgrade 2 of your fortresses, which is going to be how you add more points to the fortress effectively, while also allowing you to move 1, and you can do that in any order. Whenever you have 2 icons on a card, you can do them in any order. And then lastly, we have Ritual. Ritual is going to allow you to, well, not allow, it's going to require you to remove 1 from one of your fortresses. Then you have to go ahead and copy another card, and if you are the first person to play this card in this particular round, you get to go ahead and move the starting player. The starting player only gets to move once per cycle of cycle of cards played, which means if multiple play Ritual at the same time, then only one player will benefit from that last effect, but the other 2 will still be in play. And keep in mind that's per individual play, which means as soon as you play again, you can again pivot and adjust the starting player. Now again, you're only playing 4 of these cards. 4 of these cards will be played, and that's going to determine how you move, how you attack, how you take control or upgrade fortresses. And again, the Ritual gives you the most flexibility because it's the only way you can really do something twice in the rounds. You're going to do that until all the players have moved in different orders. You know, they've taken control of a fortress over here. We have different things happening in the game. Maybe this was also taking care of this fortress over here. You know, you're over there. You have all these different things happening in the game, but then at the end of the round, once all players have positioned in different ways, you're going to go ahead and initiate any battles. Basically, whenever you have 2 units next to each other, you're going to initiate a battle between those 2 units. And battles, we haven't really talked about how battles work yet, but you're going to go ahead and, well, resolve a battle and see who is left standing, with the losing player having to retreat, the winning player choosing where they retreat to, so pushing you away, and then possibly moving into their zones. You can have the ability to go ahead and chase the losing player in the game. That's basically, well, you know, let's talk about battles. I'm not done with the rules quite yet. So how does a battle actually resolve? Well, in battles, you're going to have a hand of cards. You're going to have your own hand of cards over here that's going to be used. You're going to start by revealing the strength. So, for example, we have this unit versus this unit. Let's go ahead and find those respective enemies or respective units. We have 4 strength over here. We'll mark that on the battle track over here. And we have this guy, the Fox unit, we already know is a 2 strength unit. Probably shouldn't have ambitiously chased that battle, but it is what it is. And then both players have their own hand of cards. Now, you wouldn't actually normally see the opposing hands of cards, but for the sake of, well, showing you how to play, we'll go ahead and do this. These are actually terrible hands of cards for both these players, because the way battles work is you're going to be playing cards from your hand to augment your strength. The tricky part is cards have a color, which is the battlefield they can be used on. This card over here is the only card that the blue player can play right now to go ahead and augment their strength, so they go ahead and buff their strength up from 2 to 8, like so. Now the purple player can go ahead and respond by playing a card. In general in the game, the weakest player, or the player who has the weakest strength, is going to be the person who has the ability to go ahead and either yield the battle and lose, or alternatively continue playing cards. It's going to pass back and forth, the weakest player always being the one who can play. So right now they'll go ahead and play this 4 over here, bumping them up to 4, and then right now, again, keep in mind, they don't know each other's hands right now. Each player knows that they don't have more blue cards, but they don't know each other's hands, so maybe we go ahead and the tricky part right now is how to react to this. Do we play a card? Because you can always play a card for the value of 1 on the reverse. The tricky part there is by doing so, you might be revealing, if you play a card now with a value of 1, you might kind of be revealing that you don't actually have more. This is going to be going back and forth, players playing cards until, let's say, for example, let's say the battle ends over here right now, and it's currently blue's turn. Blue has the ability to go ahead and play something, but they could try to go ahead and continue upwards, and what they'll do is they'll go ahead and play a card face down right now. So they'll play a card face down to bump their value by 1, and then at this point, they'll go ahead and yield. You see, in combat, you generally want to yield when you don't have that much strength lower than leader, because your core army is going to lose strength equal to the difference between the 2 values. So you're constantly trying to figure out how far do you want to push. Do you think you have the right cards to push for a victory, or do you need to gracefully go for a defeat because right now they don't have enough board positioning or card positioning to control given the current battlefield. Now keep in mind, in an actual game, players will be choosing where to position their armies based on the cards they have in their hand, which is a big part of the game. That ability of trying to figure out, do you have a dominance in green? Do you have enough cards in the green sectors that you can go ahead and win battles there, or do you need to shy a little bit away from there? And then reading how other players are setting up their own units is going to be a big part of that as well. So that's basically what's going on in the game as players try to engage in battle, either doing the main season phase through the ambush card or even the ritual recalling the ambush card, or alternatively after the main phase, the various battles that the enemy units will be involved in, and trying to control that you can win for those battles and take down, lower your opponent's strength of the units, trying to weed good cards from the hand, and set yourself up for greater success as you try to take control of various forces in the game. That's basically the way this will play out. You're going to be doing that across 3 rounds of play. Few other things we didn't really get into. The way you redraw hands of cards, you can give up a turn to draw 5 cards. You have a hand limit of 10. When you take control of fortresses, you're going to draw 2 and discard 1. Well, you draw 2 to your hand and discard any 1, so you have some degree of control over there. There are also asymmetric player abilities as well, so a bunch of other things that are going on that we didn't get into every detail of, but that's basically the idea of how you play Yield. Across 3 rounds of play, you're going to be playing 4 cards each round. Those cards are going to determine the action of how you move around the board, take control of various fortresses, buttress your fortress, or possibly weaken them to get more flexibility. Rinse and repeat across those 3 rounds until one player is left standing the victor of the game. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into the review, starting off with ease of play. Overall, I'd say the rules for the game are mostly straightforward. For the most part, it's a fairly simple game as far as what you're trying to do. The general round sequence, the game sequence, the hidden armies, the cards you're playing, the battles you involve yourself in. For the most part, it's fairly straightforward. I think one thing that I thought was needlessly complex for a game this straightforward otherwise is multiplayer battles. Multiplayer battles are basically the same idea as a regular battle, but because you're dealing with multiple people, there's a whole rules change of who has control at any given point. If you yield, who are you yielding to? It's not that complicated, but there's like a whole extra page of rules just to deal with the sequencing of it. So the actual, how it actually plays out is, I would argue, is fairly intuitive, but the nature of it means that it felt a little needlessly complicated to resolve multiplayer battles. For myself, they didn't happen that often as we were playing, but nonetheless, it was an extra full set of how to check the process until you have a few of them under your belt. I just felt it was a little needlessly complicated. But other than that, the game, I'd say, is fairly straightforward in terms of how it operates. Games usually last around 45 minutes, somewhere in that range. I think the box says like 45, no, so 20 minutes per player, 20 minutes per player. So yeah, I'd say that, honestly, I think you might even be fast. I don't know. Either way, our games are around 45 minutes. I think it's fast. Like a 4-player game is not, at least not in our experience, is an hour and 20 minutes or whatnot. But anyways, as far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is the hidden army strength and the bluffing around not only that, but also your hand of cards. Players are going to be watching, especially as you start to learn the game, players are going to be watching as to where you go, how you move your units around the board, and which zones you seem to be being mindful of trying to avoid or not avoid in the game, because you're desperately trying to make sure that you have the right positioning to ensure that you have control of the battlefield, that you can play the right cards to ensure that you win the battles when they happen. And so either leaning into what you are able to do, your high strength armies or your hand of cards that actually gives you control, that's one way of playing it, but you also could be paying attention to what the other players are doing and trying to be mindful of, well, it might appear that you have enough strength in that region, and chasing down players and being aggressive is another element of the game. So the entire bluffing around your hidden hand of cards, as well as your unit strength, is a big part of the gameplay. The asymmetric player powers are a nice thing that lends themselves to the game as well, giving you a little bit of extra variance to why you might play one faction or another, or what your competitive advantage might be. So for example, we have Lemron, who can move 1 with their fortresses. We have Vaima, who all face down cards in battle, in that little battle we played, would actually add +3 to their face down cards instead of +1. And these cards are double-sided, giving you two abilities for each faction in the game. Knowing when and where to choose your battles is a big part of it. Knowing when and where to play your ambush card is a big part of it. Your ritual card is going to give you the greatest amount of flexibility in the game. In general, I think the ritual card is the thing that gives you the most agency as far as how to do something twice that other players can't do twice. Well, unless they use their ritual card as well. But again, you have that aspect of trying to figure out which action do you want to repeat. Which one's going to be the most beneficial? Is diving into another ambush useful? Is taking control of more fortresses? What is it that's going to help you the most in the current board state? And is it worth paying for that by losing a point on one of your fortresses? The ritual card, I think, is the thing that gives you the greatest degree of flexibility as you play through a round. As far as things I don't like in the game, and then also it's a fast-playing area control game. As far as things I don't like in the game, first of all, the back-and-forth battles, I didn't fully appreciate them as much as I think that, I don't know, I felt that the constant playing cards back and forth until one player is the victor, while I understand that and agree there's a lot of hand management in the game, the actual back-and-forth tit-for-tat, I didn't find as rewarding as I say most other games and battle systems, where it's usually more of a direct resolution. That back-and-forth, and again, you are playing around your hand, so I'm not saying there's no strategy in it, there's definitely strategy in it. I just found it like, oh, I'm up by 2. No, I'm up by 4. I'm up by 3. I'm up by 1. That whole back and forth just didn't feel as satisfying as many other battle resolution systems I've seen in other games. I'll say that the 3 army limit means that you are wandering around the board constantly, and there's only so much you can do as far as maintaining control of your own fortresses, especially at higher player counts, although it should note that there are different player boards for 2, 3, and 4 players or whatnot, so there are different boards to adapt to the player counts. But past that, I'd say in general, I did feel that the ability to conquer fortresses is definitely present in the game, but the ability to hold onto fortresses is limited, which means it is similar to the way the battles are almost just a back and forth of who's winning. The fortresses are also a bit of a back and forth as to, I take your fortress, you take mine. Look, they're worth more points now because every time you switch control, they go up in points, but it just felt like a bit more of a tit for tat as you go back and forth trying to acquire fortresses again and again in the game. This doesn't feel like a typical area control game with a little bit of pushing, a little bit of defense. It kind of feels like you're running around the battlefield with minimal defense. There can be defense, but there's minimal defense in the game. And then also I'll say that there's not a ton going on. The main game mechanics are going to be playing cards secretly from your 6 cards to try to figure out which cards are going to be the right play at the right time, and then playing cards from your hand in battle to go ahead and augment your forces. Once your units are revealed, you're going to go ahead and have more knowledge over the other units, although again at the end of round 1 and round 2, you are adding some strength to your units. You're going to draw cards from the deck over here, and then add strength to your collective armies, which we'll get to in a second, but basically adjusting your player dials. But there's not a ton going on. This is a fast play cards, move around the board, take control of fortresses, play cards to try to, win the battles and push people out and get more control over where everyone is at any given point. It's just, there's not a lot of variance to the actual things you're able to do in the gameplay. As far as what I can see others not liking, I'll say that I mentioned kind of briefly, there's this rebuttressing on your forces at the end of each round. You're going to be adding strength to your dials, and that's tricky because if you are playing in a group that you don't like the ability to cheat, that gives you a very strong ability to cheat in the game where players can just adjust dials and no one's going to really remember or be able to track fully how you adjusted your dials in different ways. Now, I will say that my general recommendation with things like this is don't play with people who you're worried about cheating with, but it's also worth you knowing that that kind of hidden information and ability to manipulate is in the game in case you are someone who doesn't like that. And then lastly, there is a small memory element. As you go ahead and engage in battles, you'll see the opposing player's forces, and if you can track what their forces ended off as after the whole resolution and any detractions necessary, if you can track other players' units better than other players can, that gives you a small memory element to the game. Again, it goes away a little bit at the end of each round because players can add to their forces, but there's still some degree of residual knowledge even then, and so if you don't like memory components, this game also has a memory component. As far as final thoughts on Yield, Yield's an interesting one because for me, if you're looking for fast-playing area control, this definitely checks the boxes. As far as the general presentation, it's coming from BFF Games. I usually appreciate their art style in general, and that's true here as well. The board I felt was a little bit more, fixed in terms of, and again, they're going for colorblind friendly as well, but it means that the board, having great art behind it, is very functional but doesn't pull me in as much. But the general graphic design, the presentation, the fast-moving area control, all of those are solid things, but I think I just felt that I wanted more from what the experience can do. In terms of the things you're trying to do, it kind of felt like fast-playing area control, go back and forth, both in combats as well as in the taking control of fortresses. It felt like a tit-for-tat kind of approach to an area control game. For me, I had fun with it, I've enjoyed it, but it's not one that I was pulled in as much as I would have liked to. It's a 3 out of 5 for me. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, if you're looking for another game that has a degree of hidden armies with a very similar mechanic as far as the fixed army strength in total, but then how you divide it, Fractured Sky from Ivy Games had a similar idea, but much more focused on directly placing your units on the board as opposed to the tactical maneuvering, but they relied heavily on that limited strength divided up amongst 3 armies mechanic. And if you're looking for a game that felt a little similar, and this one I can't fixate as why, but a similar feeling experience for me that gave you a lot more going on in the game would be Tyrants in the Underdark, a deck building area control game with a similar board presentation, but a lot more going on in the overall idea of what the game is doing. Check out Tyrants in the Underdark from, I believe, WizKids, but I could be wrong. Wizards of the Coast. From Wizards of the Coast. Tyrants in the Underdark from Wizards of the Coast. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.